Hey there. Welcome to my home and another edition of Line Showings with Marin. In this episode we'll be discussing snow waxing with Booger Red Snow Wax. Hey folks, so we are down here in my garage. Excuse the poor sound quality and the amateur tuning zone. This is where I wax most of my boards. I've got just basic sawhorse set up. It's not the best, but it definitely gets the job done. So, I guess so. We'll get started with I've got a prime sample of Booger Red's Slick as Snot Snowboard Ski Wax here. It's really waxing the white space powder board with today. Get this stick slick and ready to slide for the snow that's coming. So Booger Red's is the only wax shaped like a nose that comes with snot. And it's not. It's a great all-temp wax. It's a wax that is made in the Pacific Northwest, just south of Seattle, by a dedicated snowboarder who loves snowboarding and loves to go fast and knows what we have to deal with here in the Pacific Northwest or West Coast Canada as far as snow conditions. So we'll jump right into it here. A couple things you should have is a zone to do your waxing in, whether it's sawhorses or you've got something more permanent set up, if you've got more space in your house, whatever. That's great. You need an iron, preferably something with adjustable temperature on it, a scraper, and then I like to have a few different things to buff with at the end to clean everything up, put some texture back into the base of the board, and just generally make everything look nice and pretty. I've already cleaned up the base on this with some wax remover or base cleaner, and so it's set and ready to go. So we're going to jump right into it. As far as your adjustable iron, you just want to make sure that we're not smoking a whole bunch when we get the wax going on here. So you may need to adjust that. Different temperatures of wax, different wax formulas need different temperatures of iron. So, okay, so we've got this base prep. It's ready to go. Got my iron going. I was taught to drip off the corner of the iron, and you get a nice even drip. You know where you're going to be going. I like to do the shake and spread method. Gets even drips. Some people just like to leave nice long lines. I'm actually going to turn this down a tiny bit because I see wax, a little smoke coming off it already. So we just jump right into it and start waxing. So we've got the Booger Reds and we're ready to go. So I like to do S's as I lay my wax down, and then I come back through and make figure eights out of those. Trying to get a nice even spread of wax, maybe a little bit down the edges. And that's really it. I mean, really you want to be as sparing as you can with the wax. I might need to add a little bit more after I spread this out, but the thinner you got on, the easier it is to scrape, and the longer your wax is going to last. And there's really no need to go overboard with the amount of wax you're using. Alright, so I've been doing some nice long strokes here to spread out what I dripped on already, see where I might want to drip a little extra. I'm going to add a little bit extra to this nose because the big scoop on this nose is going to see a lot of snow, and I want that to be the fastest section. So I want no dry spots, no missed sections at the front. So add a little bit more here. But again, just the bare amount that we need to get this fully covered. And again, nice long smooth strokes. You get that spread out there. Not leaving the iron in any one spot too long. Okay, so once you've got the initial wax spread out, I then like to go back over it again with long, even slightly slower passes, and just really letting that iron sink in and make nice, long, even strips of wax with not a lot of bumps or texture to it. Any extra texture and streaks you might have after laying down the wax is just going to make scraping harder because, of course, when you're scraping once the board is cold, again, more ridges just means you've got maybe too much in one spot. So I'm going to switch modes here, get a little point of view, and do another pass. So I'm back on the tripod now. So spread that wax out really nice and even. So now you got this cool. It's got to be cool to touch. It's just going to sink in better the more you let it cool. If you want to get really technical, you can heat it up again, get as much wax in the pores again, let it cool again. That's going to let your wax stay the longest, but most people don't do that every time they wax because it takes twice as long. So perfect time to crack a cold one, or if you've got multiple pores that you're going to be waxing in this wax session. Then you can do the next couple while one cools, and then by the time you've got through all the rest of that, generally speaking, then it will be time to scrape. So, and again, I mean, it kind of depends on the space in which you're tuning. Of course, a cooler space is going to cool that board and wax down faster. You'll be able to scrape it a little bit sooner. Warning that really cold wax, obviously harder to scrape than warm wax. So, yeah, I'm going to put that up on the side for now. I'm going to film a close-up of how that wax looks on the board. So, you know, there are a couple small streaks and whatnot there, but for the most part, it's quite nice and smooth, and I've got all of the important spots with a decent coat of wax on them. So on this board, or on all boards, your edges, that's where you're going to lose wax the fastest from. And then because this board has a big fat scoop on it, I made sure there's going to be a lot of wax on there where there's going to be a lot of surface area touching the snow. And so I want to make sure I'm sliding as fast as possible. Alright, so you've waited patiently, let your base cool down, waxed on the boards, had a cool beverage, whatever it was. Now you need a couple other things before you start the next step. First is scraper, the standard plastic snowboard scraper. You can use other kinds, but this would be the standard and probably the easiest to find. I've had this one for like 20 years, so once you get your wax kit set up, you're pretty well set except for just buying new wax, and then periodically you may have to replace bits and pieces. So the other two bits I like to use is a Scotch-Brite pad for an initial buff once you're done the scrape, and then a slightly more structured scrubbing brush. Again, this for putting some nice texture into the little bit of wax that's left over on the base of your board, so you have a spot for moisture and water to funnel out of, and makes it look nice and keeps you going fast. When you're scraping your board, you want to go nose to tail. Just generally the way you want to do it. Again, it's the best for the base, it's best for the structure of the base, and generally speaking, you want to scrape in the direction that you want the board sliding to have the fastest, nicest scrape. So we're going to get going, again, kind of starting in like long motions, taking off big chunks, and then as you get closer to the finished product, there's going to be less coming off, and it'll be like a little bit more fine detail. So we're going to jump right into it. So when I am scraping, I'm keeping that blade angled this way rather than this way. Again, we're trying to be as nice to the base as possible. We don't want to take away any of the natural base structure by scraping too harshly. Again, this is just kind of as it's been passed down over the years. So. If you are able to set up your wax zone, a permanent wax zone, it is nice to have your wax area a little bit higher, kind of like chest height, rib height. It's nice and easy to put pressure down to make it nice to wax, to scrape. It's closer to for looking at. It would be nicer on your back if you're doing a whole bunch of boards or skis or something. But so that's something to keep in mind. Also, these sawhorses, you can see have quite a bit of movement. Relock that one down here as best I can. Again, these aren't the most ideal, but they totally work. You just got to keep an eye on them. So again, having a permanent setup, obviously much more desirable. So generally you may find that there's a slight low spot under where you mounted the bindings where there's a little bit more wax. Your scraper may stick a little bit there. You may have to bend the scraper to get into that formation a little bit that your binding tension is creating. Again, not a big deal. Probably shouldn't have it mounted quite so tight, but it's a thing. It happens, and it's a normal part of snowboarding. I like to keep a clean blade going on my scraper as much as possible, so I do tend to scrape that wax off pretty frequently just through keeping that nice kind of plastic edge as sharp as it should be. As you get closer to the finished product, you may need to flip to the shorter side to get a little bit more specific with your scrapes. Here you're okay to kind of go against the grain, I guess you'd call it. Again, you want to be conscious of how much pressure, because you don't want to be putting too much pressure on the base going that way. Again, you can scrape this later, no problem. And that'll just clean up some of the tighter, more specific spots that you might have along the edges, or again, if you have that low spot under the bindings, flipping the scraper a little bit will help you access that wax a little bit easier to clean it up as much as possible. So yeah, once you have it mostly clean, we're going to go back to some nice long strokes. Again, we want to make sure we're taking off as much of that wax as possible before we get to the buff, which is going to take off even a little bit more and again put some texture back into the base surface of the board. You just want to make sure that that scraper is coming up as clean as possible and that there's no visible spots where you can see some dull wax versus some more polished base. So yeah, if you've seen those spots, those are spots that you have to revisit with your scraper to make sure that you're taking it off as much as possible. And sometimes you may need to adjust how your board's sitting so you can put enough pressure right on the spot that has the wax. Voila, tail's nice and clean now. do the same, shift it backwards and clean up this nose. So a good test for if you are scraped enough to now turn to buffing is to take a pretty clean or cleanish scraper, and you should be able to pretty much drag that along and not have it pitch up. So if it's hitting a spot where you feel it stop, right there, that means there's a tiny bit of wax buildup that you can revisit. Again, we're going to do a couple nice long strokes to take out those spots that was made by doing one spot specific. Okay, so now we have a scraped base. It's pretty clean. There's no visible spots of like too much extra wax anywhere. So now we are going to get to buffing. Okay, so again, I do a two-part step with the buffing. I start with one very old Scotch-Brite pad. Again, just trying to take off as much of that wax as possible, make this surface as smooth as possible. Then we're going to move to this guy here and put some nice looking lines in it. So again, we're going to go nose to tail. There's nice firm pressure all the way through. It's already looking much nicer here, so again, nice straight lines, nose, tail. One thing you can do at this step, if you do find that you have one spot with just a tiny bit too much, is give it a quick buff back and forth, and then again, nice long stroke, even it out. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just actually take this one and wrap it around the previous Scotch-Brite I was using. And now I'm going to put some nice, again, nice even pressure, go nose to tail, some nice lengthwise stripes in there. And then what I'm actually going to do is run 45-degree crisscross pattern on both sides. Again, putting some nice texture to the base, making it perform as good as possible across the widest range of snow conditions. You can use a fancy roto brush for this step. I have one. I don't have my drill charged and available right now, so totally fine to do it by hand. Fully acceptable. And so now I'm going to do the 45-degree diamond drag here. And so you'll see as you're doing it, you'll see the lines start to show up. This you don't need a ton of pressure. Switch sides so we have that nose to tail orientation going always. So we're going to run over the top, and you can see those nice textured exits showing up in the base now. And that means we are done. This board's ready to shred. Go race, go hit some power lines. That's white space powder board all waxed up with Booger Reds, Snowboard, and Ski Wax.